There is a battle more fierce than any fought with swords, more critical than any waged on fields of war. It is silent, invisible, and yet it rages every moment of your life. It's not fought outside of you, but within you. This is the battle in your mind. The battlefield is your thoughts. The weapons are ideas, the enemy, lies, fear, doubt, discouragement. And if the enemy can win that battle in your mind, he doesn't need chains to imprison you. He only needs thoughts to enslave you. But I tell you today, you were not created to be a prisoner of your thoughts. You were not destined to live under the tyranny of fear, nor under the shadows of shame. You were born for victory. You were crafted in light. But to walk in that light, you must learn to fight. Victory begins not with your hands, but with your thoughts. You can't change your life until you change your mind. Because where your mind goes, your life will follow. If you think defeat, you will live defeated. If you believe the lie, you'll walk in the lie. But if you align your thoughts with truth, your life will rise in power. The battle that matters most in life does not take place on the outside. It happens within you. It happens in your thoughts, your feelings, your fears, your doubts. That is where the real war is fought. You can lose a job and still be strong. You can lose friends and still stay upright. But if you lose in your mind, everything else begins to collapse. The enemy knows this. That is why the most persistent attacks are not in your circumstances, but in your thoughts. He doesn't need chains to bind you if he can convince you that you're already defeated. If he can make you believe the lie, you will live as if it were the truth. And that is how the mind becomes a battlefield. Thoughts against thoughts, truth against lies, fear against faith, light against darkness. This is why your thoughts matter more than you realize. What you dwell on shapes who you become. If you let negative thoughts take root, they will grow into strongholds that govern your emotions, your words, and your decisions. But if you plant truth and you water it with belief, it will bear fruit in the way you live and act. People spend years trying to fix the results of their thinking, habits, addictions, insecurities. Without realizing the source of it all lies in their minds. Until the thinking changes, the outcomes stay the same. The direction of your life always follows the direction of your thoughts. That is why those who win in life have first won the fight in their minds. They have refused to accept defeat as final. They have learned to silence the voices of doubt. They have trained themselves to think in alignment with truth, not emotion, not fear, not opinion. What you see in your life is often the fruit of what has been sown in your thoughts. The mind is a garden. You cannot expect a harvest of peace if you have planted seeds of fear. You cannot expect clarity if all you nurture is confusion. And you cannot expect victory while you are cultivating defeat. Everything begins in the soil of the mind. And like any garden, it must be guarded. If you leave it unprotected, weeds will grow. Lies will creep in. Bitterness will spread. So you must take up the task of the watchman. You must filter every thought that enters. Ask it, does this bring life or death? Does it lift me or weaken me? Does it align with who I am called to be? You have the power to accept or reject any thought. Just because a thought enters your mind doesn't mean it deserves to stay. You don't have to own every idea that knocks on your mental door. You are the gatekeeper. You decide what gets to stay and what must go. The most dangerous battles are not the loud ones. They are the quiet ones. The subtle suggestions, the inner criticisms, the whispers of, "You're not good enough," or "You'll never make it." These are not harmless. They are destructive forces if allowed to take root. But the good news is, thoughts can be changed. They can be replaced. And with practice, they can be transformed. The mind is not fixed. It is flexible. You can rewire it. You can retrain it. You can teach it truth until truth becomes your instinct instead of fear. Every time you choose to believe what is right over what is easy, you win a small battle. And over time, those small battles turn into victory. No one becomes mentally strong overnight. It is built decision by decision, thought by thought, day by day. The mind is shaped like a sword in fire, by pressure, by friction, by the repeated choice to rise when everything in you wants to surrender. When you begin to win the battle in your mind, everything else begins to align. Your speech changes. Your relationships shift. Your energy rises. You no longer live reacting to life, but directing it. You no longer see yourself as a victim of circumstances, but a steward of purpose. And it all begins with what you believe in your deepest places. Winning this battle means recognizing the enemy's strategy early. It means understanding that not every thought is yours and not every idea deserves your agreement. Agreement is power. When you agree with truth, you step into strength. When you agree with fear, you step into defeat. You must be intentional with what you allow yourself to think. Just like you are careful with what you eat or drink, you must be even more careful with what you meditate on, because it does not only affect your moment, it shapes your future. The mind, once renewed, becomes a powerful weapon. It no longer folds under pressure. It no longer bows to lies. It becomes a fortress of truth that cannot be shaken. But first, you must decide that the battle is worth fighting. You must decide that the battlefield in your mind is sacred ground, and no lie has the right to rule it. You don't fight darkness by swinging at it. You don't conquer it by analyzing how deep it is or how long it's been there. You overcome it by one thing: turning on the light. Light doesn't argue with darkness. It doesn't negotiate or beg it to leave. It simply appears and darkness vanishes. This is the principle that applies not only to the physical world, but to the mind and spirit. The enemy works in shadows. His tools are lies, confusion, fear, and doubt. But none of these can stand when truth is present. Lies depend on your ignorance of the truth. They lose their power the moment light enters. That is why the key to winning the battle in your mind is not fighting darkness directly, but replacing it with something stronger. Truth thoughts are like tenants in your mind. Some bring peace, others bring chaos. But you get to choose who stays. Darkness may try to enter through a painful memory, a hurtful word, or a whisper of fear. But you don't have to entertain it. You have the power to choose what thoughts you allow to grow. Trying to wrestle with every negative thought will exhaust you. The goal isn't to win arguments with darkness. It's to shift your focus to what is light, what is true, what is strong, and what is eternal. When your mind becomes fixed on truth, darkness loses its place. Light doesn't need to fight. It just needs to be present. Fear is one of the darkest forces in the mind. It magnifies problems, shrinks your sense of purpose, and freezes your progress. But fear cannot stand in the presence of truth. When you remind yourself of what is true, that you are not alone, that you are made for more, that you are called with a purpose, fear begins to fade. This is why replacing fear with truth is far more effective than trying to suppress fear on your own. You don't defeat fear by focusing on how not to feel afraid. You defeat it by anchoring your mind in truth so deeply that fear cannot penetrate. The mind is not neutral territory. It will be filled with something. If you do not choose to fill it with truth, it will be filled with noise. The world will feed it fear, scarcity, comparison, distraction. But you were not created to live reactive. You were made to live intentional. That means choosing what thoughts you meditate on, what beliefs you rehearse, and what stories you tell yourself. Darkness may knock, but you do not have to answer. Truth must become the default setting of your mind. You wake up and remind yourself who you are. You remind yourself what matters. You remind yourself what is eternal and unshakable. The mind is like a room. If left alone, dust and clutter begin to settle. Negative thoughts gather like cobwebs. But if you clean it daily with truth, it becomes a place of clarity. The more you dwell on truth, the more automatic it becomes. It becomes your instinct, Your reflex, your weapon. You begin to see through the lie before it even finishes its sentence. And in that awareness, you win. You no longer fight thoughts one by one. You rise above them because truth elevates you. Truth becomes the light that exposes every deception. And once exposed, deception loses its strength. When you walk into a dark room and flip the switch, you don't wonder if the darkness will argue. You expect it to leave. That is the confidence you must walk with in your mind. When you speak truth, speak it boldly. When you shift your thoughts, do it with authority. There is no need to tiptoe around the lies you've lived with. They do not own you. They do not define you. And they do not get to stay once truth takes up residence. Light is always greater than darkness. Even a single candle can break the night. That's how powerful one true thought can be when its believed truth is not based on what you feel. Feelings change. Truth does not. You may feel unworthy, but the truth is you are chosen. You may feel defeated, but the truth is you are more than a conqueror. You may feel small, but the truth is you are a carrier of purpose. You may feel broken, but the truth is you are not beyond healing. Truth is not a comfort phrase. It's a weapon. You don't recite it to feel better. You declare it to take ground in your mind. And the more ground you take, the more territory darkness loses. Training your mind to choose truth takes time. You've believed certain lies for years, but every time you speak truth, you tear down a brick in the walls that once held you captive. You don't have to fight every thought that comes against you. You simply need to raise the standard of truth so high that anything less cannot remain. The mind becomes stronger every time you choose truth over reaction, light over fear, clarity over confusion. Your identity is not shaped by the lies you've heard or the failures you've experienced. It is not defined by the rejections you've faced or the opinions of those who couldn't see your worth. You were not created to live under the label of brokenness, failure, or fear. You were formed with intention, woven with purpose, and called into being by a voice greater than the voices that try to diminish you. But if you believe the lie, you'll live the lie. If you allow those voices to echo long enough in your mind, they become the lens through which you see yourself. And what you believe about yourself determines how you move through life. That's why the battle is not just about thoughts. It's about identity. The enemy doesn't fear your appearance, your education, or your background. What he fears is that you might wake up and recognize who you really are. Because the moment you do, you become unstoppable. If he can't destroy you, he'll try to convince you that you're already destroyed. If he can't silence your voice, he'll try to make you believe it doesn't matter. That's why so many people live far beneath their calling. Not because they lack ability, but because they've accepted an identity that was never theirs to carry. You may have heard you're not enough, that you're too weak, too flawed, too late. That's not truth. That's distortion. That's fear dressed up as wisdom. That's defeat disguised as realism. But the truth about your identity is not found in your feelings. It's found in the unchanging foundation of purpose. You weren't made by accident. You weren't formed without reason. You are not a mistake. You carry value not because of what you do, but because of who you are. And when you understand who you are, you begin to live differently. You stop settling for less than you deserve. You stop entertaining thoughts that make you shrink. You stop aligning with voices that keep you stuck. Identity is not built by external validation. It is revealed through truth. You don't need permission to believe you are worthy. You don't need applause to be valuable. You don't need recognition to know you matter. You are not what happened to you. You are not what was said about you. You are not the mistake you made or the fear you carry. The world will try to define you by what is visible. But your true identity runs deeper than the surface. It's not in your image, it's in your essence. And when you know your essence, no label can limit you. You may have been rejected, but you are not unlovable. You may have failed, but you are not a failure. You may have fallen, but you are not finished. The difference between those who rise and those who remain stuck is not always strength, it's identity. Those who rise believe something different about who they are. You were called to rise. You were created with a blueprint of greatness within you. And while that greatness may have been buried under years of pain or silence, it is still there. Your identity cannot be erased, only hidden. And the moment you choose to see yourself through the eyes of truth, it begins to emerge again. You don't have to create a new self. You only need to uncover the one that's been there all along. The one not shaped by fear, but by faith, not driven by approval, but grounded in purpose. There is a war over your identity because your identity holds power. If you see yourself as weak, you'll never step into strength. If you see yourself as broken, you'll never believe in healing. But if you see yourself as chosen, you'll live with intention. If you see yourself as called, you'll stop wasting time trying to fit into places you've outgrown. When your mind aligns with your true identity, everything changes. You begin to speak with boldness. You walk with authority. You stop apologizing for being who you were meant to be. Too many people live their lives performing for acceptance, chasing approval, and wearing masks that hide their true self. But freedom begins the moment you stop pretending and start believing. The moment you let go of borrowed labels and pick up the truth about who you are. The moment you realize you don't need to compete, compare, or conform. You only need to be who you were always meant to be. The process of reclaiming your identity is not always easy, but it is necessary. You may have to unlearn what you were taught. You may have to break through strongholds of thinking that have ruled your mind for years. But every thought you reject that doesn't align with your true identity is a step toward freedom. Every time you speak truth to yourself, you are rewriting the script. You are telling the darkness that it doesn't get to define your light. You are standing in the authority of who you are, not who fear says you are. Victory doesn't begin with circumstances changing or enemies retreating. It begins the moment you take control of your thoughts. The mind is the command center of your life. Every decision, every reaction, every word spoken flows from what happens in your inner world. If your thoughts are chaotic, your life becomes unstable. If your thoughts are weak, your responses will be weak. But when your thoughts are disciplined, your actions become powerful. The first step to real victory is not external action. It is internal alignment. What you think determines what you believe. What you believe shapes how you live, and how you live determines where you go. That is why the greatest wars are not fought on the battlefield, but in the silence of the mind. The enemy knows he cannot force you to surrender, so he works to persuade you to. He sends thoughts that sound like your own voice, weaving in discouragement, confusion, fear, and insecurity. If you accept them as truth, you begin to live them out. Not because they are true, but because you gave them permission to stay. The mind left unchecked becomes the enemy's playground. He cannot read your mind, but he can influence your atmosphere. And when you allow every thought to go unchecked, you hand over the keys to your peace. Victory comes when you stop agreeing with lies and start filtering every thought through the lens of truth. Taking control of your thoughts doesn't mean pretending negative ones don't exist. It means recognizing them for what they are and deciding they don't belong. Every thought is a seed. You choose whether to water it. The more attention you give it, the more it grows. You cannot control what thoughts knock at your door, but you can choose which ones you let in. That choice is where power begins. When you become aware of your mental patterns, you begin to see which ones are lifting you and which ones are limiting you. And once you see them, you can replace them. You don't just erase thoughts, you rewrite them. You don't just block fear, you plant courage. You don't just resist confusion, you focus on clarity. The battlefield of the mind doesn't require strength in the way the world defines it. It requires intention. It requires discipline. It requires the daily decision to challenge the stories you've told yourself for years. Stories like, I'm not enough, I'll never change, nothing good ever lasts. These stories feel familiar because you've repeated them, not because they're true. But just as they were learned, they can be unlearned. You are not powerless in this fight. You have authority. The mind is not your enemy. It's your greatest ally when trained in truth. Taking control of your thoughts means learning to speak to yourself rather than listen to everything that enters your head. Most people wait for motivation to come, for the environment to change, for someone to lift them up. But those who win understand they must command their own atmosphere. They must speak truth to their doubts, speak faith to their fear, speak strength to their weariness. Words carry weight, especially when spoken internally. You don't need an audience to affirm your value. You need the voice inside your mind to stop contradicting it. This kind of mental discipline doesn't happen once. It's a daily practice. Like a soldier who trains even in peacetime, you prepare your mind before the storm ever hits. You rehearse truth so thoroughly that when the lie comes, it feels foreign. You guard your thoughts the way a watchman guards the gate. And when the wrong thought tries to enter, you confront it immediately, not with fear, but with authority. You don't ask it to leave, you evict it. You don't hope for peace. You create it by removing what threatens it. This is how victory becomes a mindset, not just an outcome. You start to walk differently, think differently, respond differently. You stop reacting to everything around you and start responding from the strength within you. You become proactive with your peace. You become intentional with your focus. You stop allowing your emotions to control the narrative. Your thoughts are no longer scattered by circumstance. They are anchored in conviction every time you choose truth over fear, peace over panic, discipline over distraction. You win a battle in the mind. It may not be visible to anyone else. It may not feel dramatic or loud, but it shifts the course of your life. The real victories are quiet. They happen in the choices no one sees, in the thoughts you refuse to entertain, in the patterns you break, in the lies you stop rehearsing. You don't have to wait for everything around you to change in order to live from a place of victory. It starts in the thoughts you think, the truth you embrace, and the authority you walk in each day. So now, walk as one who knows the battle is already won, not by your strength alone, but by the truth that lives within you. You are not a prisoner of fear, not a servant to lies, not a victim of your past. You are a warrior of light, chosen to rise, called to stand, and destined to overcome. Every thought you take captive, every lie you silence, every truth you declare builds the ground beneath your feet. And as you take each step forward with a renewed mind, you are no longer walking toward victory. You are walking from it. Let your mind be the garden where truth grows, where light reigns, and where peace is your permanent atmosphere. The war was never to destroy you. It was to awaken you. And now, awakened, you are ready to live free.